So, if you look around your life right now, do you ever recognize that feeling of being kind of locked into place?
Uh-huh. Not physically trapped, but mentally.
Exactly.
Oh,
That
yeah.
sense where the days just sort of bleed together,
Hmm.
Alarms, notifications, deadlines, just the same routines.
Yeah.
And you might have, security, maybe success, but there's still this underlying restlessness, like something's missing.
It's almost a defining feature of hypermodernity, isn't it?
Mhm.
Our sources really dig into this. They see it less as simple burnout and more like a systemic thing.
Systemic how?
Well, rooted in this economic pressure for constant connectivity,
Yeah.
it subtly eats away at our cognitive bandwidth, our actual autonomy.
Okay, okay, let's unpack this then. We're diving into some sources today that look at freedom differently, not as some big dramatic escape necessarily,
Right.
but as something conscious, actionable, something we can reclaim by, well, intentionally seeking out experiences that wake up the mind, the senses.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And the research we looked at is pretty consistent. It keeps pointing back to two fundamental paths for finding that liberation again:
Which are?
intentional travel and, maybe even more fundamentally, deep engagement with nature.
Got it. Travel and nature.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to detail the specific ways these work. The
Mm.
science, the psychology, the practical stuff behind how adventure and nature and maybe mindfulness too.
How they bring back that confidence, that curiosity, that feeling of being properly alive.
Exactly that, yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the problem itself, these invisible chains. Because I think for a lot of listeners, the idea that structure is the trap feels, well, counterintuitive. We're taught structure is good, routine helps us succeed.
And it does, to a point. The sources aren't saying ditch all routine,
Right.
but they argue that over-reliance on it, that leads to what you could call cognitive inertia,
Mm.
mental rigidity.
How so? What does that mean, cognitive inertia?
Well, when you just repeat the same mental and physical patterns day in, day out, your brain essentially narrows its field of what feels possible or even comfortable. You stop practicing mental flexibility.
Ah, okay, so your world literally shrinks because you stop asking what if. You're just running the program on autopilot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then technology layers on top of that. It's a really critical piece of this modern confinement.
More than just distraction, like scrolling social media.
Oh, yeah, much deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's the psychological weight of always being accessible. Our attention is constantly tethered to obligations, to the need to respond instantly. The
Ah.
sources frame it as being forced into a constant state of readiness rather than actual presence.
I see. So you're never really off. Even if you're physically free, say on a Saturday afternoon, part of your mind is still sort of braced, waiting for that next ping, that next urgent email.
Precisely. That low-level hum of expectation
Yeah.
and the mental consequences. They go beyond just feeling restless or tired.
Well, think about chronic decision fatigue, a lack of real creative problem solving.
When your brain is just constantly reacting to things coming at it, you lose that internal quiet space you need for deep thinking, for genuine insights.
And that manifests as,
Often is this kind of pervasive sense of emptiness
hmm,
or just a quiet sadness, even when, on paper, everything's fine, material needs are met.
right. So, okay, if someone listening is nodding along, recognizing these symptoms, that sort of background yearning for escape, the feeling of unfulfillment despite having enough, what's the real signal they need a reset? A fundamental one.
I think the primary signal our sources point to is that clear disconnect between your inner desires, what you feel you need, and your actual daily life, your actions.
Mm.
And specifically, if you find that experiences in nature or maybe travel leave you feeling disproportionately energized and inspired.
Like not just relaxed, but really restored.
Exactly. Actively restored. That's your whole system, mind, body, spirit, signaling that it's craving reconnection.
Yeah.
It needs to break that cognitive inertia we talked about.
Okay, so if the trap is this mental rigidity, this chronic stress, we need a remedy that works on a fundamental level, something solid.
Right.
And just going outside might sound a bit simplistic to some. Is there real hard science showing that connecting with nature isn't just pleasant, but actually essential?
Oh, absolutely. The science is quite definitive, actually.
Yeah.
Especially research under the umbrella of ecotherapy or nature therapy. It's looking like a physiological necessity, not just a nice to have.
Okay.
The most basic, well-documented benefit is stress hormone reduction. Just being in a natural setting measurably lowers cortisol levels.
Okay, so it calms us down physiologically. Beyond just de-stressing, though, what else is happening? What are the specific mechanisms improving our health?
Right. This is where it gets really fascinating. One key mechanism involves these compounds called phytoncides.
Phytoncides.
Yeah, they're natural antimicrobial compounds that trees release, especially in dense forests. And research, particularly out of Japan, shows that inhaling these compounds directly stimulates natural killer cell activity, NK cells, in our immune system.
Wait, hang on. So smelling the forest air actually boosts your immune cells. It's not just about feeling good, it's cellular health,
Ah,
immune defense.
Precisely. It's quantifiable immune-boosting activity. It's quite remarkable. And beyond that, nature exposure consistently boosts cognitive function, things like attention span, creativity.
Wow.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, different types of natural environments seem to optimize different kinds of recovery.
Okay, tell us more about that. How do different environments work differently on our brains or bodies?
Well, forests, for example, central to that practice of Shinrin-yoku or forest bathing, they seem particularly good at calming the nervous system, reducing blood pressure, likely through that rich, deep sensory input.
Okay. Forests, calm. What about water? Oceans, rivers?
Those environments, sometimes called blue spaces in the research, they offer this very rhythmic, predictable sensory input. The sound of waves, the flow of a river.
It is quite meditative.
Exactly. It acts as a powerful meditate agent, very effective at resetting anxiety loops in the brain.
And mountains, they feel totally different. That sense of height, the huge views.
They inspire awe. And awe is a really critical emotion psychologically. It forces us to shift our focus away from ourselves, our own small worries, and recognize something vast, something greater.
A perspective shift.
A huge one. It provides this almost instant psychological reframing of our daily concerns. And really, this is the foundation of nature therapy, leveraging these deeply wired responses to build genuine resilience and emotional stability.
So if nature provides this essential reset, this grounding, then adventure and intentional travel, they're like the active tools, the things we use to cultivate that mental flexibility we talked about losing.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Our sources definitely emphasize that real freedom often requires a bit of boldness.
Right.
Freedom isn't passive. It's an active state of engagement. It involves courage, curiosity, a willingness to really embrace life fully. And adventure, stepping outside the familiar, it's just a powerful way to dissolve those self-imposed mental limits.
That comfort zone. It feels safe, sure, but it's essentially static, isn't it? It doesn't promote growth.
Not much, right?
Whereas travel, especially if you're doing it independently, it forces you to adapt, to problem solve constantly, in real time, like figuring out a foreign subway system or dealing with a communication barrier when you least expect it.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite of that cognitive inertia. It forces you to build confidence by relying on your internal resources, not just familiar external systems.
Yeah.
Every little challenge you navigate successfully on a trip, no matter how small it seems, it strengthens that inner resilience, which is why solo challenges often have such a big impact.
Because they show you directly that your limits are often just ideas, narratives you've accepted.
Exactly. Self-imposed narratives, you prove them wrong through action.
The sources we looked at had some great examples of this, these small, almost personal transformation stories, those aha moments that really stick.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, there was the professional who felt completely swamped by corporate life. The rigid structure, the constant demands, the city noise, just overwhelmed.
Uh-huh.
And they described finding this incredible clarity and actually the courage to change their entire career path, not through some grand plan, but by navigating a solo month-long trek. Somewhere remote, I think it was the Andean foothills.
Wow.
The sheer physical demands, the reliance on self, it just shattered their old sense of impossibility.
That makes sense. Or there was another one about a parent who'd really internalized this fear of failure, of taking risks.
Right, the surfing story.
Yeah. On a family trip, I think it was Bali, they just impulsively decided to try learning to surf. And realizing that the simple, playful act of falling down and getting back up again over and over.
That it was actually this profound exercise in resilience.
Exactly. And something they consciously brought back into their daily life, their parenting.
These aren't just nice vacation anecdotes. They represent real structural shifts in thinking. And remember the office worker, tired of the predictable cubicle life.
Who volunteered somewhere remote.
Yeah, found this deep human connection and a sense of purpose helping on an eco project deep in the Amazon. That stark contrast, the complete disruption of their normal routine, that was the catalyst for change.
So it sounds like maybe the specific environment or the exact activity, it's almost secondary. The main thing is disrupting the old patterns, cultivating that inner courage.
I think that's the core insight, yes. The adventure, whatever form it takes, reveals that the boundary you thought was real, the one holding you back, is often just an idea, not a physical wall.
Okay, so you break those patterns, you go on the trip, you spend deep time in nature. How do you make sure those benefits, that feeling of freedom, doesn't just evaporate when you get back home? It can't just be about ticking off sites or rushing through a park.
No, absolutely not. It's not fleeting if you approach it right. The sources stress that the real depth, the lasting benefits of these experiences, they get magnified hugely when you approach them with mindfulness.
Okay. Mindful exploration, what does that look like in practice?
It really means consciously reducing the pull of, external schedules, phone notifications, the what's next anxiety, allowing yourself to be truly present where you are.
So it's not just glancing at a famous mountain, it's actually seeing it, taking it in.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's pausing to notice the small things. The specific texture of, say, rough tree bark against your hand, the precise smell of damp earth after rain, or maybe the complex soundscape of a foreign city street, instead of just worrying about getting the perfect photo angle.
Right.
It's about intentionally engaging all your senses. That's what anchors the experience in your memory, in your body, not just as a thought.
Could you give the listener some really specific, actionable sensory techniques, things they could try right now, whether they're, hiking in the Andes or just sitting in their own backyard?
Sure. Okay, start with sight. Don't just look, observe. Practice noticing the way light and shadow play on surfaces. Watch clouds move for a minute. Find patterns in the pavement you usually ignore.
Okay, simple observation.
Then sound. Move beyond just hearing background noise. Actively listen. Try to pick out the layers, different bird songs, the wind in the leaves, the underlying rhythm of city traffic. And maybe most grounding is touch. Use simple physical contact. Feel the sand under your feet if you're near a beach. Notice the cool metal of a handrail, the roughness of a brick wall. Just feel it. It pulls you right into the present moment.
That makes sense. Sensory grounding. And the sources also mention solitude playing a big role in deepening this transformation. Why is being alone sometimes so essential for reclaiming freedom?
Well, solitude basically allows your mind to quiet down from all the external noise, other people's expectations, demands, opinions. It creates space. When you're alone, especially in an unfamiliar place or out in nature, you're kind of forced to confront your own thoughts, your own habitual patterns of behavior without the usual distractions.
You see yourself more clearly.
Exactly. That self-awareness is absolutely key to achieving lasting psychological freedom. Alone time in nature, in particular, seems to amplify the senses and gives the mind space to really process those big experiences, turning them into insights that stick.
And how do we make sure those insights do stick?
We need to actively solidify them. Tools like journaling really help here. Writing down observations, tracking emotional responses, it helps translate those sometimes abstract feelings into concrete lessons you can revisit.
Right.
Even intentional photography, where you're not just snapping away, but taking time to really frame a shot, to notice the details that forces that presence we talked about. These are all tools for cognitive integration, making it part of you.
Okay, this brings us to maybe the biggest hurdle for most people, integration. Bringing it all back home. We can't all just, disappear into the wilderness forever like Thoreau.
Right. Not practical for most.
So how do we take that profound sense of freedom, that active engagement we found on the mountaintop or during that solo trip, and weave it back into the Monday to Friday, the 9 to 5 routine?
That's the crucial step. The key, according to our sources, is conscious reflection and then deliberate integration. You have to actually ask yourself, okay, what specific limitations did I push past on that journey? What did I learn about my own capabilities when things got a bit challenging?
So you identify the learning.
Yes. Because the goal isn't just to hold on to a nice memory. It's to sustain the psychological shift that occurred.
Okay, so how do we sustain it? We need to maybe create mini versions, daily micro-adventures that give us some of those same neural benefits.
Exactly. Think about powerful, simple daily practices. The core principle is just disrupting that cognitive inertia in small, manageable ways.
Like what?
Start with scheduled digital detoxes, even just short, non-negotiable breaks from screens every day. 20 minutes, half an hour where you deliberately reconnect with your immediate physical environment. It counts.
Yeah, that feels doable. And I like the idea of a micro-adventure, too. That sounds important.
It is. That spontaneous decision to just go to a local park you haven't visited, or walk a different route home, or explore a nearby nature reserve for an hour, with no specific goal other than just being present and observing.
Breaking the pattern.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you can transform existing routines, too. Think about your daily commute. Instead of zoning out or mentally prepping for work stress, try using it as a mindful observation period. Use your senses, like we talked about. Notice sights, sounds, textures. Anchor yourself.
That simple shift actually mimics some of those grounding techniques from nature therapy, doesn't it?
It really does. It resets you before the day even properly starts. And what about bringing those bigger travel memories home more vividly?
How?
Use sensory triggers. Try cooking a complex foreign dish you loved on a trip. Really focus on the smells and tastes. Or put on music from a place that felt liberating while you do chores or work.
Ah, using sensory memory to evoke the feeling.
Exactly. These cues can powerfully reactivate the neural pathways associated with that feeling of curiosity, openness, and freedom. It helps weave the lessons learned abroad into the actual fabric of your everyday life here.
So by doing these small, consistent things, freedom stops being this temporary luxury, something you have to chase on vacation.
Right.
And instead it becomes more like a daily practice, a cultivated state of being.
A companion.
That's the ultimate synthesis, yes. Freedom is cultivated through consistent practice. It lives in those mindful pauses you take, the solo walks around the block, the small acts of courage to step just slightly outside your comfort zone, even if that zone is just your own neighborhood. And if we recall that core idea that freedom is really the presence of courage, curiosity, and that willingness to embrace life fully, then it's clear it needs to be nurtured. Consistently. Daily.
Which really brings up a crucial final question for everyone listening, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If active freedom is defined by that courage and curiosity, what one small act of exploration, however minor, will you commit to today to start nurturing that feeling?